The Diabetes Podcast is for educational purposes only and is not intended to diagnose or treat any disease. Please do not apply any of this information without first speaking to your doctor.
Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the Diabetes Podcast, where we empower diabetics to live the life they deserve. And today, Dr. Grady and I are about to get a little emotional here.
Yeah, so today we're talking about mental health and diabetes, and basically how this is going to go is we're talking about the struggles of living with type 1 diabetes on a day-to-day basis. So if you have friends or loved ones that you would like to have them better understand what it's like to live with diabetes, because that's one of the most, probably the hardest thing is relating how hard it is. And it's also one of the hardest things to understand when you're not diabetic is how hard it is on a day-to-day basis. And so that being said, you can see how this might turn kind of depressing and dark, but at the same time, this is going to be an inspiring podcast, because if you've been listening to me and Garrett for any amount of time, you know that we don't think this way, and we have a very positive outlook on life and life with diabetes. So stick with us.
Mm-hmm. But that being said, it's not always sunshine and rainbows. It gets freaking hard out there, and we kind of want to start by the daily struggle a diabetic might encounter, as well as I think a good jumping off point is something that happened at work today with one of my patients. So I was working with a patient, and the veteran saw that I was working with my insulin pump and saw the cord sticking out. And this veteran was a medic in the military and, is a nurse and is very well knowledgeable about a lot of medical information. And so she asked me about my diabetes, and she was talking about her friend who's been diagnosed since 2 years old. And then as we are talking, she says, "Oh yeah, well she's actually a terrible diabetic." And what a complicated phrase that is to hear.
Yeah.
And what a anger infusing phrase that is. Understand, and while that phrase has meaning to it and some understanding, but to a non-diabetic, who the heck are you to say such a term? Why don't you unpack what is a terrible diabetic, Grady? What would that even mean?
Yeah, I think when people say that, whether they understand the disease or not. So since this person does have a fair understanding of the disease, I'm sure they've seen their fair share of emergency situations with diabetics, whether it be high or low. And so coming from that position, she probably does understand and sees the person eating a certain way or living a certain way, whether that be not taking insulin, not checking the blood sugar, things like that. However, I have people comment that to me who don't know much about diabetes, and they just see a person eating a certain way and assuming that they aren't controlling their diabetes very well or aren't thinking about it. And so it can sometimes be unfairly labeled that way, or somewhat justifiably labeled that way. But ultimately, it's hard to until you put it in that context. Like when people would say that to me, I never really took it to heart, because I just kind of understood what they're trying to convey to me, as far as like, okay, this person doesn't check their blood sugar or doesn't try to keep it in range. I think if somebody were to label somebody who's trying to keep it in range a terrible diabetic, that I would probably be very upset with. But if somebody were to label somebody who's not trying at all a terrible diabetic, well, there's a little bit more justification there, even though there's probably a lot more to unpack than just what you see on the surface. But when I hear that, that's kind of what I think.
Yeah, it's a perception issue, right? It's how other people perceive the person and label it, and then how we perceive that word and phrase at the same time too. Yeah, so you hit the nail right on the head there, Grady, with what is the intent behind what the diabetic is doing, what that person is doing. And there's a perception issue with, and there's not necessarily a intent to harm with those words, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like somebody saying, "Oh, you're a terrible diabetic," because they don't know the struggle that we go through every day, doesn't know how dramatic that phrase could actually be. Because a lot of people are either tying their self-worth to what they're doing and what they're trying, or what they're not, and they're trying to create a degree of separation. And when it comes to, I think what you said, if your blood sugar is out of control and you're trying, you're not a terrible diabetic. You're on a learning journey.
Yeah.
That's completely different than somebody who is, with uncontrolled numbers, who's not trying. But at the same time, that doesn't mean they're terrible. That just means they don't have any kind of guidance whatsoever.
Mm-hmm.
What is it? No one was asked for this kind of disease or disorder. So what makes them terrible about it? Just the fact that they haven't fully processed everything yet. I think, but again, that person who said those types of words don't fully understand the weight of what they're saying. So I don't think there needs to be this counter attack to some people. And I've definitely have you ever snapped at somebody if they've said something like that to you?
No, because I don't know. I'm a hard person to offend, and two, I don't read that much into people's comments, whether it be because they're informed or they're not informed. Because people say stuff all the time without realizing what a person's going through, and diabetes is something that really nobody can understand what they're going through unless they've gone through that. And I can't really think of anything that's like diabetes that can compare to it. The constant thinking about food, blood sugar, insulin all the time. At least to my knowledge, somebody can tell me, but doesn't really happen with a whole lot of other conditions.
Right. No, I agree. I don't think there's much out there that has the same amount of weight, even other autoimmunity. It's it doesn't require the same degree of management. That's what it really comes down to, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So I don't fault the non-diabetic for saying that, because I think why they say it to me is because they see me as this person of health and this, what they see. I'm not saying this to myself, but what they see is this perfect diabetic, who
floating right
that's
now.
not even the case. I'm not a perfect diabetic at all, but that's what they see and that's what they perceive. And so when they see me and see how I take care of my diabetes and how as on top of it as I can be, then they make that comparison in their mind and say, well, this person is not a good diabetic, because they see a big difference between what I'm doing to try and control my diabetes versus what they see this other person.
Mm-hmm.
So it's without that understanding of what each of us is going through, when you see a massive difference between one person and the other, it's easy to come to that conclusion and be like, this person's just not a good diabetic.
Right. I think a term that even medical professionals were using back in the day was uncompliant. An uncompliant diabetic is what endocrinologists used to use. Well, the reason why your sugars are so out of whack and everything is you're not following my directions.
Yeah.
Now
I think that right there, that scenario, I think is much different, because especially me being a doctor now and working with patients, I almost always blame myself first, and before I even think about blaming the patient. What have I not done, both therapeutic wise, advice wise, and also inspiration wise? If they're not changing, what do I need to say? What do I need to do for that patient to help them get them to a spot in their mind where they can make a better decision consistently?
Mm-hmm. Well, if all of healthcare had that had that mentality, I think that would definitely get the gears turning in our healthcare system, and then insurance system and political system. But yeah, no, that it is a different situation, you're right. But that almost highlights right there. Those are two similar but very drastically different scenarios in what somebody could be a diabetic mind could be assaulted from.
Mm-hmm.
Like from two different ways, you could easily go down a spiral of, oh, it's not me. Because most doctors don't have that mentality. Most
Yeah.
doctors aren't saying, oh, it's my fault. I didn't fully explain it to you. Let me do this again because I apologize. When was the last time a doctor apologized to a patient, like in a hospital setting?
Yeah.
Probably not ever, or not very commonly. But that's just even two scenarios right there that somebody can easily start thinking, this is me. Something's wrong with me. I can't handle this. I have to do this for the rest of my life and I can't do it. So why bother? Right?
Mm-hmm.
Because on top of these advice and kind of comments from peers or friends or other medical professionals, then you actually have to do the diabetes every single day, right? Finger sticks. And at that any given moment, without CGM or not, you have to think, am I going up or down? How much insulin do I have on board? I think I've seen like it's anywhere from like 52 to 358 like questions a diabetic needs to ask a day more than a regular person.
Yeah,
I
I
don't
feel
know.
like that's
Wait,
underestimated.
I don't know how those numbers get come up with.
Yeah.
But to meal times, to when I last exercise, to checking in with yourself, to when your last bolus was, or what your overall insulin sensitivity has been over the day, over the week. You just made a post that your blood sugar has been kind of out of whack, and so you're getting more data. So you're literally doing something differently now than what you were to get a better overall understanding of how you should act in the future.
Mm-hmm.
You were thinking behind to think better in the present and doing an action now, in the present for the future.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like anything that you're doing, if you're listening and you're non-diabetic, anything that you're doing, like you're working for your job or you are on vacation, whatever scenario, whatever you're doing right now, you're running, listening to this, you're working out, listen to this, think about the questions that you've asked yourself while you're listening to this, and then times that by 10, because that's how many things a diabetic is thinking about while also trying to live their life. So if I'm working on a project in that work, let's say I'm writing a paper for school or something. While I'm writing that paper, I am thinking about what I'm going to be eating next, what I ate before, how that's affecting my blood sugar, how my blood sugar has been for the last couple of days, whether it's been good. Like even when it's good, you're thinking about, hey, it's been good. What have I been doing to make it good? Or if it's been bad, has it been low? Has it been high? Has it been up and down? And then why is that happening? Is it because I just added exercise, or because I stopped exercising, or is it because I changed the time of exercise, or they changed the type of food or when I'm eating? And then also like dosing. Since I changed those things, how do I need to change my dosage? And maybe this situation happened like years ago, and then how does that play into how I'm doing now?
And as you're thinking about all those things, as you're writing the paper, Microsoft Word pops up that says, oh, sorry, we didn't save it. And all 50 pages of what you're just writing got deleted.
Yeah.
Like the life that is normally experiencing is still happening, but you just need to somehow think about it more.
Yeah.
The capacity to be, it requires a bigger capacity to do things. And that can be hard to adjust to and learn to. Because I could have let you ramble for another minutes of just an error. Like the amount of questions you need to think is unreal every single day. And then it's like, then you need to act, and then you need to figure out it requires action. So not just thoughts. It's like, oh, do I need to stop my run right now to then check? Or you're in a roll with a paper. My blood sugar is getting low or high. I don't feel like stopping right now. I really want to continue with this momentum. Like I haven't had to walk out of a room with a patient because of my low blood sugar or high blood sugar, but I'm pretty dang close to. And I literally can interrupt whatever you're actually doing and pull you from that moment, which is unreal. Right?
Yeah. Yeah. Cause it can, like, if you're doing something that requires a lot of focus, one, asking yourself all these questions and thinking about all these things can sometimes throw you off, or at least slow you down. But
Right.
then on top of that, you're like, oh, I feel a little funny, or you're just saying, I want to make sure my blood sugar is good right now for whatever reason. And you check it and it is 250. You were totally not expecting it. You were expecting it to be perfect and being able to continue with your work. And yet this number shows up. And depending on your temperament, like for me, if I see that and I'm not expecting to see that, I'm instantly pissed off and there's no way I'm getting any work done because I'm focused on why did this happen? And now I have to worry about this and correct this. So now I got to take some insulin. And if I have to stay here and do this, I'm constantly like pissed off about why this is here. If not, I'm like, all right, I'm going to get up and go for a run so I can knock it down. So that way I don't think about it anymore and I can continue working on whatever I'm working on.
Right.
So it
And
just totally derailed what I had been doing. And now I'm like, I got to refocus. And momentum is everything when you're doing something focus based, like writing a paper or doing some type of work. It's like all that momentum just like died and you got to start it back up.
then the opposite can happen too, right? You think you're super high, and so you rage bullish, or there are a lot of memes about this. It's you think you're high, you give yourself a lot of insulin, you check, and you were perfect, but man, now your insulin on board, which you can't take out, is like 10 units, and you needed like 0, and you're like, oh no, I'm about to have a bad time. And so you start trying to eat and drink, and you start, there's fear in there, and there's a real like danger if you don't act appropriately. It's not just a psychological fear that we've talked about of like meditate, calm your mind and your brain, you'll get over it. No, it's like it requires action. You might feel fine now, but you're not about to.
Yeah.
And it can just spiral from there and there on. And there's just so many scenarios that it's hard to even articulate fully what you go through as a diabetic unless you talk with another diabetic. You're part of a diabetic community. You're going to summer camps as a kid. You're a camp counselor. You're involved in some way. Unless you're doing that, if you're just moving along your day and you live in a small town in Arkansas or in North Dakota or in some city in France, excuse my American style of not knowing geography out besides here, because I know most of our listeners are in the United States, but anyways, there are some outside, but you get the point. If you're all alone and you don't have another diabetic to really converse, it's hard to like get this burden of all these struggles about what you do on a daily basis.
Yeah, because you can like complain to somebody, just to like vent to somebody, like your parents or your loved one or your friends who are around you. You can complain to them or vent to them about what your day is like right now or what you're going through right now. But it's almost like it almost sometimes makes it worse because they can't relate. And so all they can say is like try and say some positive like words to you, and it almost kind of makes it worse because like, well, you don't even understand, like don't tell me to be happy about it, or stuff like that. And it can be really hard.
It's just if you don't feel like you're part of a community, it can just be so hurtful and hurtful and hard. And that's part of the reason why we want to have this podcast and just be another voice, so that way people can feel included, because you're not going through it alone. Right? There are millions of diabetics out there. Part of the we talked about our last episode, about 90% are type 2, which are still hard things to deal with, but 10% of them are type 1, and a lot are even undiagnosed. But man, there are millions of people in the country and in the world that are dealing with what you are, and you are not alone. And so that's step number one. is to realize that for if you're not if you are diabetic and you're struggling, is that. And if you're not diabetic and you have a friend, you need to be able to hold space, or essentially be there for them, ask them questions. Sometimes that's all you need to do. You don't need to ask advice or give advice. You just need to ask questions. And then if it clicks, it clicks.
Yeah.
But it's one of the hard things to do if you're not diabetic, because you can't force, even another diabetic can't force another diabetic to change their mindset. It
Mm-hmm.
doesn't matter that Grady, you're amazing. If I start to get resentment of myself and then my ability, and I look at you, I'm going to resent you and everything you're doing. It's not going to have zero effect on me.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So it doesn't matter that you're low carb, don't eat gluten, eat steaks and run all that. That's great for you, but screw you. You're not me. Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So there's always a comparison issue. So there's so many things every single day that we deal with. And then to be able to express it is hard. Being able to listen, if you're not diabetic, can be a pretty hard task too.
Yeah. I think depending on who the friend is, if you're non-diabetic and listening to this, who your friend is that is that, or family member that is diabetic, um, you kind of have to meet them where they are. And like for me, if I'm like really frustrated about my diabetes, like at the moment, I think probably the best thing somebody could say to me would be something like, "Yeah, screw diabetes. Like it's the worst, but
Yeah.
it is what it is." But like versus saying something like, "Oh, it's all right. You caught it. You'll be fine." Stuff like that, or like, "Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry you're feeling this way." It's like, I don't need a pity party. I'm just pissed. Like, if you can be pissed with me, that'd be great.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, and so the things we deal with on a daily basis add a lot of weight to the bar of life
Yeah.
for diabetic, right? So it's just incredibly difficult. You then A diabetic then has to go through the actions, which we kind of just commented on, but then there's frustrations with nutrition and just finding the right foods. A lot of people don't know, like, are very uneducated about how to eat and what to eat, and that can feel depressing. Like, everything I eat screws me up. I don't know what to do.
Yeah.
That is down the rabbit hole.
Mm-hmm.
Then it could be things along the lines of fear, like with Don, Don, and that he was literally afraid to work out, of low blood sugars. You can then, and then you can start creating unhealthy relationships to random things, like whether it be exercise or sleeping. Maybe somebody could have it like, oh, I don't want to go to bed because I'm afraid to go low and die at night.
Mm-hmm.
Because that is a possibility.
Yep.
There's countless things that you can start to create what seems to be unrealistic fears, but at the same time is a possibility. So you can't just shrug it off at the same
Yeah.
time. Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Like having those fears. Like, I mean, there's plenty of days where I'm like, I want to work out, but I'm like, man, I just feel like my blood sugar is really unstable. And if I go work out, I'm just gonna crash, and then that's gonna ruin my workout anyways. So it's like, do I go work out or not?
Mm-hmm.
And you have those days because like I'm one of those people where I will work out no matter how crappy I feel, as far as like unrelated to diabetes. But with diabetes, if like my blood sugar is real low or just feeling real unstable, it's like, man, it's hard to get myself to go because I don't have a whole lot of confidence in what my body's going to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's the last thing you said. I don't have a whole lot of confidence in what my body's going to do. That was like with Brandon, right? One of our episode with Brandon. He had zero confidence because he was so unstable. He couldn't do anything.
Yeah.
Right. And that's like another different example. And re-listen to that episode about his story of getting through all of that and finding the strength to be able to do some of those things. And it can be just you can just end up getting, because you think there's so many things to do and so many situations, the amount of punches that you have to take in a day increase dramatically.
Mm-hmm.
And somebody's ability to take a punch from life all depends on a lot of factors. It's not just mental strength and toughness, it's support, it's mental health,
Yeah.
it's everything.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Great. What was one of the hardest diabetic days you think you've had? Not like the first year of your diagnosis, but like, where it's like, man, you got really down, angry. I know you get more angry. What's like a day that you really felt like, shit, just screw this?
I would say I can't think of anything specifically because there's never, I shouldn't say never. There's never been a day where it's like so overwhelming that it's like stuck with me this long. Um, there's definitely been days where I'm like, man, it would just be so nice if I didn't have to worry about this. I think mainly it comes down to sports for me. So when I was in high school, um, whether it was having to take a break to check my blood sugar um, or just my blood sugar being out of whack and it affecting my performance, like we've talked about a lot before. But recently, um, moving down here to Arizona, I've been golfing with my parents fairly frequently. And like 2 weeks ago, so I've golfed like 2 times in the past like 2 weeks. So like 2 weeks ago, my blood sugar was really high. I shouldn't say really high. It was actually out of control. So it was kind of yo-yoing. And this was when I was transitioning off of long acting onto my pump. And so I was high before we went to golf. When we got to, so I took a lot of, a fair amount of insulin for the correction. And then I got to the course. We were about ready to tee off on the first hole, and I felt like I was tanking. So I drank a juice box. I didn't check my blood sugar. I should have, but I didn't check it because I felt a pretty strong indication that it was tanking. So I drank a juice box. And then like halfway through, towards the end of the front nine, I checked my blood sugar because I just wanted to see where it was because I was feeling like I was getting hungry. Usually that's one of my first indicators that my blood sugar is starting to get maybe into the normal or below normal range. So I checked it and it was 200. And I was so pissed off. And well, pretty much the whole round because my blood sugar was all over the place. I was just frustrated. And so I golfed really, really terribly because I was frustrated. So I wasn't thinking about golfing. And therefore I hit pretty bad shots. So that just made me even more frustrated. And then at the same time, like even when I'm hitting bad, I usually I'm like, it's a nice day out. I'm enjoying time with my family. It's not like I'm like, just, I don't talk to anybody because I'm so pissed. It's just like, well, whatever. And so, throughout the whole day, it was just like all over the place. And I was just so frustrated. And that day I was like, man, if I hadn't been all over the place, regardless of if I hit well or not because of my blood sugar, I at least would have enjoyed the day, spending the day with my parents, golfing and being outside in the sun. Because the very next time I went golfing, I wasn't hitting very good to start off with. And it was very similar to that last time golfing. And I was still enjoying the day because my blood sugar was fine. Whether that was physiologically a reason why my mental health went off or simply the psychology of like my blood sugar being all over the place, and I am a perfectionist, so it bothers me that it's all over the place. Whatever it was diabetes related. And that was really frustrating to me, it's frustrating to me that diabetes has such a control over me as far as my happiness goes and how well I'm able to enjoy something in the moment. Because if I'm constantly thinking about, well, God damn it, like, why is my blood sugar doing this? And what do I have to do to correct it? If I'm thinking about that while I'm on vacation or trying to enjoy a moment, like there's no enjoying that moment because I'm like, whether it's because I'm not present in the moment or also maybe I'm also irritated and pissed off about it. It's like it sucks.
Yeah, I think you said two things there, but I kind of almost want to highlight what you said in the fact that it literally just made you so angry, right? It could turn what should be a great moment or a fun moment or a relaxing moment and a moment you could be looking forward to, and just completely create this ball of anger and situation and stress that's going to have impacts on you in various ways. And then you said something along the lines of, physiologically, which we aren't talking about a whole lot here, but I mean, these high and low blood sugars are literally going to be affecting your blood chemistry and affecting your physiology. And so it doesn't only create anger and depression based on our lifestyle events, but literally it's changing how your body creates dopamine and serotonin and glutamate and GABA and everything in there from a variety of mechanisms. One could be just hyperglycemia, period. One could be because it throws off the dysfunction in your gut, and that therefore throw off your neurotransmitters because the gut flora gets all messed up. The communication between the neurotransmitters that are produced in the gut and more that's produced in the brain get thrown off. Hypoglycemia can throw off your ability to use iron. There's just so many things from a chemistry perspective that it's doing, which is wild. And so that's one thing to keep in mind too, that it's literally when you're feeling these mixed emotions, anger. I have a story about exhaustion here in a moment, but whatever you're feeling, there's a weight of everything that we're doing. But then when you then look at your trends, it literally could be fueling the fires of those emotions then too, in those roller coasters. Then you talk about, 51%, because 51% of America is females. You talk about, pre-menopause women and cycles, and that's a whole different type of stress too. That it's just crazy on how everything can be thrown off. Right. So with me, I have a thought and a memory. It was actually when I was in chiropractic school, and it was 2017. I was just starting, I was like within a year, like less than a year into chiropractic school. And man, I was getting beat up. I wasn't sure if I could hack this. I wasn't sure if I wanted to continue doing this type of work and this schooling. I probably failed like a quiz and like 3 exams. And then I had more I had to study for that night. I was probably getting low sleep because of stress. I was like, probably waking up at 3 a.m. Don't recommend waking up at 3 a.m., folks. I was waking up at 3 a.m. I was questioning my worth. My worth at that moment was attaching to my academic performance. I was then starting to live with you and meet you, and I could see how well academically you were doing, how much more control your diabetes was doing. And I knew there was in my mind, I created a disconnect of so many things of where I wanted to be in life and where I was, on top of literally just being tired of waking up at a bad time so many nights and weeks in a row, getting beat up with all these exams. I get home, it's like 9:52, and it's all intents and purposes, it's late. It's not that late. It's late if you've been up since 3 a.m. and doing it for a while. And I remember just thinking, I'm just going to freaking pass out. And I walk home. I go knees forward, bent, just face plant onto my bed, backpacks on my back. And I just finally get a moment that sometimes you need after a long day of just a breath of just. And I was trying to take that moment. I was so wanted that moment. I was looking forward to that moment where I could breathe and rest. And then what starts going off? Beep,
Most
beep,
annoying sound in the world.
My pocket starts vibrating, and it's my insulin pump. And even that the day and life was demanding so much of me, and I deserved to pass out and get the minimal amount of sleep that I was requiring of myself at that time, and I was about to, I had to make a decision in my head if I was going to ignore my diabetes, and I knew if I did, it would make situations worse, or if I wanted to say, screw diabetes. I don't care. I'm going to just go to bed anyways. And I just went to bed. And what was that alarm? I don't even know, but I know I woke up with my blood sugar super high. I could have been low reservoir, low battery, infusion set was blocked. It could have been, I don't think I had a CGM at that moment. So I don't think it was a message like that. But life was demanding so much. I put so much pressure in my life. And this could happen for so many reasons. You could have financial issues. You could have relationship issues, family issues, work issues. When life is taking all of your energy and then you get home, beep, 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 diabetes doesn't stop.
Yep.
And that's one of the hardest things about when we talk about everything that we deal with on a daily basis is that, yeah, we deal with it. And, we're trying to get this empathy with a listener saying, whatever you do, think about that, whatever you're thinking about times 10, but it's there. Your run's going to eventually end.
Yeah.
You're eventually going to go home from work and you might be able to separate yourself. Some people can't, but you might be able to separate yourself from that stress, but the diabetes stress doesn't stop no matter what.
Yep.
And that's one of the hardest things about this condition.
Yeah, for sure. Like the ever-present responsibility that you typically feel with, you got to take care of yourself, and you do, but it's the end of the day, you're exhausted and you don't want to do it. So you got to make a decision. And it's a tough decision sometimes. Sometimes it's a no-brainer. You're like, oh, I got energy. Let's change my pump, change my port site. We're good to go. Let's go. Other days it's like, man, it's just like in the morning for work. Like it's hard, sometimes hard to get your butt out of bed to go to work. You're like peeling yourself off the bed, and eventually you make it. But then as a diabetic, it's like you go to lay down in bed and you're like, all right, I'm done for the day. Checked out. We're done. And then you have something go off, or you start feeling low, or whatever the case may be. And then it's like, man, I have to get up off this comfy bed and take care of my diabetes, because it's usually something relatively simple. Like changing a pump takes 5 minutes, 5-10 minutes. In reality, it doesn't seem that hard, that time consuming to do. But in that moment, it's like, geez, I have to get up and run a marathon. No, you just have to change your pump, but they pretty much are the same thing at that moment.
They are. I can say that from experience. They are. At that exact moment, it feels like it. And that's just because of the weight. No. Every little thing, every decision is another ounce, another pound, another plate on the squat rack of life. And it's sometimes you don't want to freaking bring that bar back up. But the key is somehow finding the strength to do it, right? And also to recognize and give you the love, the self-love that you're not going to do it every time, and that's okay. There's a new day tomorrow. You can try again tomorrow. Not weighing on the poor decisions of the past, but realizing that tomorrow and today is different, and maybe you can make a different decision, right? For me, when making those small little movements or making those small little changes, like I really don't want to do that, I'll do that later kind of thing, or I'll do it tomorrow. When it comes to my diabetes, is the phrase of, doing the right thing is always the right thing. Like just kind of like close my eyes. And now that Grady's in CrossFit, he kind of will get to know this mentality a little bit better. Congratulations, Grady, on joining the cult. But putting your head down and just doing the work. Like if you're on an assault bike, the easiest way to get through the assault bike is just to put your head down and just to freaking go. Yep. In a less intense way, easiest way to think is, I got to do this. Literally don't even think of it. Don't shut everything else off if you can, and just do it. You can't think about it. I don't want to do it. You just got to do it.
Yep.
Kind of thing. And for me, that's been a kind of past year and a half, 2 years, what I've thought about in my brain of trying to find energy to do the things that I don't want to do when I need to do it, regarding my diabetes. That's kind of what I think about.
Yeah. So now that are coming to the end of the pity party, Let's try to be a little bit more positive.
I got one more pity party comment.
Okay, let's go for it.
In a different way, it's I just want to highlight too on the number situation.
Yeah.
We've talked about this enough, but I feel like, or in various ways, but if we're talking about mental health, like we have to recognize the self-worth issues that we can easily develop with our numbers, right? With A1C, with blood sugar, insulin, total insulin, basal rates, all we think about life in numbers. And I think it's hard for if you're not a diabetic to realize that, hey, my friend or my loved one literally is obsessing over this. You know, how people talk about body dysmorphia and feeling with scales, like you're not your weight. That's that sensation, but literally nonstop all day with your blood sugar. And I think it's important to realize that you're not your number. And just because your blood sugar says one thing doesn't mean that you're a failure. You're not that terrible diabetic that we talked about earlier. That's
Yeah.
just one glimpse of moment in time.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the things that has stuck with me since I watched this movie, it's Ford versus Ferrari.
Oh,
And it
with
like,
Matt Damon, yeah.
yeah, and it highlights like kind of my mindset with life and especially with diabetes. The driver, which is um, Christian Bale,
Oh, okay.
and he talks about driving the perfect lap and trying to do that every time. And I think his son makes the comment, "Well, you can't drive a perfect lap every time," or maybe it's even you can't drive a perfect lap. He's like, "No, but I can try." And so that's like my mindset all the time is like, you can't be perfect in life or in diabetes or whatever it is. You can't be perfect, but man, you can try. And if you can try and get as close as perfection as you can, man, you're going to be doing pretty darn good. And so the goal and with that mindset, it's you don't get offended and don't take a personal attack on yourself because you weren't perfect in that moment. The thing is, like, celebrate those moments when you were perfect or you were close to perfect. But then those moments where you're not perfect, you take a step back and you try to learn from those and then move forward and get better. So that way, when you are presented with that situation in the future, you now have a better strategy to overcome that and try to be perfect in that moment for that lap, if you will. So it's kind of like with everything. People always say like failure is not failure; it's just a learning process. You learn from failure versus winning is great, but you're always going to fail sometime. So learn from it so you can increase the percentage that you win.
Right. And that's the thing is, if it can be hard to get there if you're thinking, oh, I can't do this. My numbers say this. It's not about that. Like you have like as best as you can, you need to realize that this is something that is controllable. This is something that isn't you. Because outside of all these thoughts that we have, you can still be a complete success.
Yeah.
Work can be great. You could be the best wife or husband in the world. You could have so much love to give, and that because you're doing all these things, but your numbers are bad, doesn't make you a bad person. And it's just one more aspect to it's another lap. It's another race that's happening simultaneously that you can continue to try to do the perfect lap. And for those people that might be ignoring their diabetes and might say, I just kind of do whatever, and I bolus and correct and I just live with it, or live against it in reality, realizing it's okay to start the engine and it's okay to just try to start to do a lap. You might stall. You might have the wrong kind of gas in the car, but your car is going to keep on moving. You're going to find a way to keep moving. You're going to change the oil. You're going to change the fuel. What you're doing in this other race of life has no correlation to your diabetes life. And especially as who you are as a person, success is so much bigger than just achievements and degrees and getting things on your CV and Facebook and Instagram. Like it's so much bigger than that. Right. So if you're if you're kind of tearing away from your diabetes, or if you have a friend or a loved one that doesn't seem to really be active in it, it's okay just to start the car a little bit. Hell, just freaking put it in neutral, and just push it and
Yeah.
see how far it goes. Eventually, the momentum will be there, and then you can continue with the laps. And it's okay to try and fail, like you
Yeah.
said, because it's just really learning.
Yeah. As long as you're trying, you're probably gonna get better. Um,
Yeah.
Obviously, life happens, and so wrenches get thrown into the mix, and sometimes you can't do anything about it, and therefore your diabetes suffers from it because you've never been through something like that before. You don't know how to navigate that situation. So yeah, sometimes you're not going to do so hot, but you get up, you learn from it, and you move forward. That's all you
Right.
can do.
So all you can do. So it's, you know, I think not Will Ferrell, Will Smith. Um, Will Ferrell is a funny guy, not a motivating guy. Will
Yeah.
Smith is both. But Will Smith has a similar story of, laying the brick as perfectly as possible. And you don't set out to build a wall, you set out to lay a brick as perfectly as you can. And soon enough, you have a wall
Mm-hmm.
kind of thing. Um, and so it's hard. There's so many things that will weigh you down. I mean, hell, was it? I looked up a statistic earlier that diabetics are 2 to 3 times higher to have depression in their life compared to non-diabetics, and it's for various reasons. And if you don't have somebody to vent to, if you don't know who to even communicate this, it can feel very trapping. But it doesn't mean that you can't change your habits. It doesn't mean that you can't find a group. It doesn't mean that you can learn. You might be motivated and say, yeah, let me fail, but I don't know where to start. There are so many resources out there, not just this podcast, obviously, but books, textbooks, seminars, groups, so many resources that you can continue to learn from and say, how can I pick myself up out of this?
Mm-hmm.
You know, but depression and diabetes is real, and it's important to point that out, but it doesn't mean it has to be that way.
Yeah, exactly. It's all about mindset for me, at least. And my mindset is, like I said before, trying to chase perfection, but also not trying to take things so personally that it brings me down. Like I said, I get irritated, I get pissed off about it, but I also don't let it linger for days and weeks. Like I try to learn from it and get better at it and try things. And so I've tried enough things to where for most situations I can figure it out and get it better relatively quickly enough to where it's not going to destroy my whole day. It may destroy that moment, but it's not going to destroy my whole day. And at the same time, like my overall mindset just for my life with diabetes is like, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. And man, diabetes is tough. And guess what? I'm pushing through
Tougher.
it and succeeding. And what that tells me is that I'm pretty damn tough. I'm tougher
Right.
than diabetes. And so if I can do diabetes successfully, man, there's nothing that can stop me.
The mentality that you need for that is so strong. And if then you learn to, it's almost like some would say maybe we even should be grateful because we have
Yeah.
more so than anyone else, we have a chance to sharpen our tools. This is getting a little bit more different type of mentality. Maybe not everyone subscribes to, but man, we have a chance every day to test ourselves and to strengthen our ability to learn, strengthen our ability to adapt, strengthen our ability to say, fuck you, I'm not going to do that, I'm not going to comply, I'm going to do what I know is right for me.
Mm-hmm.
That could be with foods and diets, that could be with moving, exercising. And then once you realize how much of a badass you are because you're actually doing it, or you're even trying, and that you found the strength just to get your car in damn neutral and start going. Once you realize you have that strength, that can be applied in every other aspect of your life. Like it's two races happening simultaneously. You could be, your diabetes race could be moving, you need to figure out a way to do that, or it could be both slow on both races, and you can start moving your diabetic car. But then you realize that fuel is 10 times more of diesel fuel that you can put in whatever Prius car you have that will make that thing go 1,000,000 miles an hour. Obviously, that's a joke. I have nothing wrong. Maybe you do, but I have nothing wrong with diesel cars or electric cars or whatever have you, but you get the point of realizing that the fuel that you can attain and gather from your diabetes can fuel everything else, you know. But the balancing act and the presence that needs and the self-awareness that needs is requires a lot. But if you can attain that, oh man, your diabetes can make you so strong, or rather you already are strong, and you can finally realize how strong you actually are.
Yeah. Yeah. So in those moments of like feeling down, just think about all the things that diabetes has given you, not taken away from you, what it has given you. For me, I mean, it's given me a lot of things, and I contribute a lot of things to my diabetes positively. Like my mindset and my resolve is like so much stronger because I have diabetes. If I didn't have diabetes, I don't think I would be very strong in my beliefs and my habits, because I had nothing to motivate me to be strong in my beliefs and my habits. Diabetes has pushed me into being the healthiest person I think I ever could have been. I don't think I could have been as healthy as I am if I didn't have diabetes. I think I'd still be eating like crap and maybe not even exercising as much either. And, um, and like mindset wise, like I said before, like I feel tougher and feel like I can handle a lot more because of all the things that I've been able to handle because of diabetes. One of my favorite quotes from Dan Gable is, after you've wrestled, everything in life is easy. And I think about that all the time, both with wrestling, because that is so true for wrestling. But at the same time, I think about that with diabetes too. Like, you know, going and doing a project or something like that, it's like, this is nothing compared to what I've already done in my life and had to do in my life and had to overcome in my life because of diabetes. And so think about those things that, and it's going to be different for every person, but think about those things that diabetes gives you and has positively impacted you in your life. And I think we've talked about this before, the question of would you take away the diabetes if you could take a pill, or have never gotten it? And for me, it's like I would take the pill now, but I wouldn't try to erase what has happened before. Like I wouldn't want to go back to 2006 and have that pill, because I wouldn't be the person I am today. Like diabetes has made me the person I am today, and I'm grateful for it. And I'm going to keep moving forward.
Yeah, no, well said. Well said. I actually, you know, I think in 2000, no, this must have been 2008. So actually today is my 14-year anniversary today.
Congratulations.
Myself, made to 14 years. Whoo, level 14. Thank you. But I remember when I was first diagnosed, and I felt really confused about all this stuff, you know, kind of this, you know, all the things that's giving you that you talked about. I remember back in like 8th grade, we were writing poetry in my English course or something, and I wrote 2 side by side poems, and I can't write poetry for shit. Like I realized that there was a time in my life in high school I thought I could.
Yeah.
But I remember writing 2 side by side poems called My Curse and My Gift. And I like made it, like I wrote it all out, and then I edited it so like it printed as a C shape for curse, and then one as like a G, which the G was actually kind of hard to do because I was just pushing tab a lot on Microsoft Word. But anyways, I remember the commentary from my teacher at the time was saying, Garrett, these are really good. I think the curse one's a lot better, but I get what you're trying to do. And so at the moment, I was only fueled by anger and fear and sadness towards the condition. But now I think if I wrote those two, it would be flip-flopped. You know, it would be the gift is I could see so much more value in what it's given me than anything else. But I think the 3 things that really transitioned my life with diabetes all was a perfect storm at the same time. And it all happened with chiropractic school. And after, you know, undergrad was, you know, one was actually moving in with you and meeting another diabetic and having that community and realizing I wasn't alone and I could vent to somebody, you know, that was huge. The second thing was then learning about healthcare in a different way, and realizing that healthcare and taking care of life takes work. And, as I continue to learn about the body and was in awe of it. So that's part of it. And the third was, as I was doing that, was realizing the emotional attachment for me. A motivator is, I want to be able to hold my kids. I want to be able to give my loved ones a hug. I want to see them with my own eyes. And realizing that once I realized that I had that power, all those three things at perfect storm set me on a path of really trying to dial in my own sugars. But that's before, it's different for everyone. What flips them over the edge, like you said, back in 2006, you probably, you would have taken that pill in a heartbeat. But now that we've gone through those trials, we can definitely see the value and that's brought in our lives. It's difficult. We still swear at it. Still sometimes physically punch my pump. Not really. Or am I? I'll let y'all decide. But it doesn't mean, there's so much value in there, and you don't have to be alone. You're not your numbers. There's so many things to realize about this that can be hard and can be overwhelming. But man, there is a sweet spot in there for sure.
Mm-hmm.
So that being said, we got anything else?
I think I've vented enough.
You've vented enough. So probably should have put this disclaimer in the beginning, but obviously, mental health and depression are very serious, and
Mm-hmm.
if you feel like you're not alone, you feel like you are alone, definitely, seek help in many ways, whether it be a trained therapist, psychologist, psychiatrist, the suicide hotline, you're not alone. And I
or
think
just finding a community. Like,
yeah.
I think for me, I always recognize when I need help is usually when I don't have, or when I am feeling down, it's because there hasn't been a community around me for whatever reason. And so I'm like, I just have to dive into a community, whether it's, sometimes it doesn't even need to be related to diabetes. Sometimes it's just, I need to be around people who are like-minded and care for me.
Right.
But if it's related to diabetes, reach out to Facebook groups or and try to meet up with people or listen to podcasts like this one or anything that
directly.
Yeah, anything that will help bring you closer to somebody that can help get you through a situation or help understand you.
Right. Yeah, there's so much out there, and it's okay to ask for help and find those communities. So it's you're not alone. And so, I almost want to summarize before the last bit, of saying, there's other people's perception of your diabetes that makes it hard. There's your own perception of your numbers. There's literally everything we deal with on a daily basis that makes this hard. There's the physiological components of unhealthy. There is managing two worlds. There's your diabetes world and everything else. And so many more complexes and connections of all those things at once that make this so hard.
Mm-hmm.
But it doesn't mean that you can't win and overcome those things.
Exactly.
So with that, Dr. Grady, we're not going to do burst my beta cells today.
This was like one big giant burst my beta cells.
Right. What's a diabetic win recently for you?
I'd say so. Recently, I made that post. Yeah. Recently, I made that post about my blood sugar being all out of whack, and then as soon as I put my pump on, it was totally fine. Or my CGM on, it was totally fine. So I was like, well, I just put this on for nothing. But at the same time, I was happy that it normalized and we're back on track.
Nice. So even just a little bit of effort, I gotta make moves to realize what's going on, and you're already on your way.
Yep.
Sometimes the intention is all it takes, right?
Yep.
So, that's awesome. For me, I would say a recent win was, I don't think we said this because I don't think I had done it yet. I did it this past weekend or last week. But I recently recalibrated my basal levels. And so I haven't seen my endo in a while, and I feel like I don't need to wait for my endo. But because life moves pretty fast, life gets busy. And so I relooked at my Dexcom data. I didn't share this last time with the brain podcast, I don't think, right? I think I shared this with you personally, but so I looked at my Dexcom data for the last 90 days, and I finally got not just on my app on my phone, but online. And so there's a couple of different more functions you can look at online and add days together and look at standard deviations with specific days and times. And so I finally successfully created a weekday and work basal and a weekend basal setting that I change in between, and I tweaked both of those. And I looked at, man, most of my outer ranges and come from the weekends. Who would have thought? When things are a little more chaotic. And but ever since I did that, I have all what it was and what I changed it to. So I'm now tracking that data, right? So I didn't just get rid of it. I know exactly what I was with my basal rates, now what I am at those two different settings, and now I'm tracking it all. So that way it's easier. I can now see the tinkering as I do it more and more in the future. But it's worked out great. I have less lows the past week and a half. Still have lows. I was low a little bit before this. So I still have lows, but less lows and less highs, I feel like, too. We've talked about how important nighttime blood sugars are so important. I feel like it's leveled those out. So it's just been a win to realize that taking maybe 20 minutes of looking at Dexcom data, not even, and tweaking it can really make a huge difference. And it's just trial and error, starting the engine, going and learning. So that felt good.
Nice. That's awesome.
Yeah. So it's already officially dark on my side of the country where I am. With your palm trees in the background, it's starting to get kind of dark there. So I think we'll end it there, folks.
That sounds good.
All right. Well, everyone, thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Diabetes Podcast, and we'll catch you on the next one.
See you.
Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. If you found value in today's conversation, we would appreciate it if you gave a 5-star review. It really helps us branch out our community and get our message across to those who really need to hear it. If you want to interact with us on social media, you can follow us on the Diabetes Podcast on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Or if you have any questions, comments, concerns, or moral outrages, you can email us at thediabetiespodcast@gmail.com. Thanks.